Okay, welcome to this deep dive. You've sent us some really interesting stuff. You want to dig into God's missionary motivation.
Yeah.
And when we talk about missionary, we're not just talking about, packing your bags and heading to a far-off land. We're going deeper to the core theological reasons behind the whole concept. Why does this even exist? That's what we're going to try to unpack today.
I think it's really fascinating. You've brought in, theology, obviously, the study of God, right?
Right.
And then missiology.
God's mission.
Which is God's mission. It's like, in your notes, it's so cool. They're not separate things.
Yeah.
No, they're, really woven together.
Absolutely. And one of your sources, actually, to set the stage here, George W. Peters, he says, quote, "Missionary theology is not an appendix to biblical theology. It belongs at its very core."
Yeah.
So we're talking about the essence of who God is.
Exactly.
And the idea that understanding God should naturally lead us to understand and want to participate in what he's doing in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. And, the big central theme that emerges from all this material is that God's desire for salvation
Right.
is really the ultimate motivator.
The ultimate motivation, yeah.
That's what drives it all.
So it's not some kind of side project.
No.
It's really baked into who he is.
Exactly. In fact, your sources, they kind of go into this idea that if you study theology without considering missiology,
Right.
It's an incomplete picture.
Right.
And vice versa. If you go off and do missions, but you don't have that strong theological grounding,
Right.
it's, again, an incomplete picture.
Giving us something, yeah.
And the point that your sources really highlight is that if you really grasp that gift of personal salvation,
Right.
the natural response should be a deep desire to be involved in God's work in the world.
So it's not just a me and Jesus kind of thing.
No, not at all.
It's okay, how does this expand outward?
Exactly. And actually, there's even a term used for the opposite of that. It's like spiritual selfishness.
Oh, wow, okay.
If you're not motivated to participate in God's mission after you've experienced his saving grace.
Spiritual selfishness.
Yeah.
Man, that's a powerful way to put it.
It is.
And it does make you reflect on, okay, am I just sort of cozying up in my own little corner of faith here? Or am I recognizing that this good news was meant to be shared?
Absolutely. And, if we pull back even further and look at the bigger picture, your notes referenced the 1970 Frankfurt Declaration,
Okay.
which explicitly stated that the primary aim of mission is, and I'm quoting here, "the glorification of the name of the one God throughout the entire world and the proclamation of the Lordship of Jesus Christ."
Right. So it's not just about us going out and doing good things.
No.
It's about God being known.
Yeah.
And the Lordship of Christ.
And what's really cool is that it emphasizes God's initiative.
Yeah.
It's not something we dreamed up.
He's already at work.
Right. He's the one who set this whole thing in motion.
Right. So we're joining in with what he's already doing.
Yeah, absolutely.
And where do we go to understand, what is he doing?
Well, your notes point us to, probably the most obvious place, the Bible itself.
Right.
It's presented as the premier missions textbook.
That's a good way to put it.
I love that. And, W.O. Carver raised this really interesting question. He said, is the Bible just a collection of different ideas, or is there a unifying theme? Is there a reason why all this stuff is together? And the answer, according to your source, quoting Crawley, is that, yes, there is a central message. It's all about God's redemptive purpose for humanity.
Okay. So it's not just a bunch of stories.
No.
It's one big story.
One big story.
About God and mankind.
Exactly.
Right. And this isn't just theory, right?
Not at all. As Peters puts it, it's a record of theology in mission, God in action in behalf of the salvation of mankind.
So we actually see him doing it.
Yeah.
Throughout history in the scriptures.
Exactly.
So we see his heart.
And that's the thing, right? The God we encounter in the Bible isn't just some distant deity who's uninvolved.
Right.
He's actively engaged.
He's working.
Yeah.
In history.
And that's why, your beliefs about God will shape how you approach missions.
Right. Okay. So foundational beliefs are key.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because that then directs everything else that flows out of that.
Exactly. And, your notes bring up this interesting historical perspective. How have those beliefs played out in actual missionary efforts?
Right.
And it's fascinating. Some missiologists, people like William Wagner, point out a connection between, a decline in missionary efforts, especially from some of those mainline Protestant denominations in the 20th century, and a weakening in their belief in the authority of Scripture.
So if they don't believe the book's true, they're not going to
be
as motivated to go share it.
Yeah.
Right.
Wagner actually says, like straight up, that a firm belief in the Bible is essential for carrying out God's commission.
So if you start to waver on that, then the motivation to share the message also wavers.
Yeah.
Right.
It's a slippery slope, you know? And Harold Linsall, he kind of echoes that, saying that, maybe this decline in missionary service is actually a reflection of deeper shifts in beliefs. Like, do they really believe the core truths of the gospel? Do they believe in the reality of humanity's lostness?
Without Christ.
Without Christ.
Right.
Do they believe in the necessity of actually obeying those biblical commands to go and make disciples?
Okay.
It's a sobering thought, you know?
It is. It
Yeah.
really makes you think, like, okay, what we do or don't do
Right.
in missions says a lot about what we really believe.
Absolutely. And your source is careful to say that, like, holding those orthodox beliefs
Right.
doesn't automatically mean, like, boom, you're going to be super passionate about mission.
You're on a plane tomorrow.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
But it's crucial.
It's the foundation.
Yeah, like, the foundation has to be there. And the worry is when there's this disconnect. Like, they call it a widening gap
Right.
between theological belief and Christian practice.
So you might say, yeah, Jesus is the only way, but then
Then
Yeah.
you could be...
deep down, are you really sure?
Yeah. Like John 14.6 says that, but do I really, really believe that?
Exactly. And then there's that question of, like, would God really condemn those who follow other faiths? It's a tough one.
Yeah.
And Crawley uses this term, religious relativism,
Right.
which is the idea that, maybe all religions are just different paths up the same mountain.
Oh, yeah. I've heard that a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the notes even mention a concern among some evangelical leaders about what they call closet universalism.
Closet universalist.
Yeah, which is like, you might say all the right things, affirm all the orthodox doctrines,
Right.
but like, do your actions really show that you believe that those who haven't accepted Christ are lost?
Right, right.
It's a question of consistency, Yeah. So it all comes back to that. Like, do we really believe that salvation is absolutely necessary? And if we do, then that should fuel that desire to share it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that brings us to the root of it all, right?
Sin.
Sin.
Yeah.
The big problem. The thing that separates us from God.
That's what your notes really focus on.
Yeah.
This concept of sin as the fundamental barrier.
Yeah, like Isaiah 59.2, your iniquities have separated you from your God.
It's like a wall.
Yeah, a huge wall. And, the point they make is that without God's intervention,
Right.
there's no way we can get over that wall on our own.
Right. No amount of good deeds.
Nope.
No amount of,
Nothing.
self-improvement or anything like that.
We're stuck.
So that's why they have this, what they call Truth One.
Yeah,
Missions is pointless if there's no sin barrier.
right. Because if everyone's already cool with God,
Already good.
then what are we doing?
Yeah, why are we bothering?
Right.
It just becomes humanitarian aid at that point.
Exactly. Like maybe we go and help people with, physical needs or whatever.
Yeah.
But the core spiritual purpose is gone.
Right. That reconciliation with God.
Yeah.
Because we all need it.
And your notes really emphasize that, like, missions assume that there's a separation
Okay.
because of sin. Like Romans 3.23.
For all have sinned.
For all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God.
Right.
That's the starting point.
Okay, so Truth 2 then dives into the nature of this barrier. Like, what is sin?
Yeah, right. What are we even talking about?
And they have this great definition from Connor. He says, sin is rebellion against the will of God.
It's not just like a mistake
Right.
or a weakness.
Or a whoopsie.
Yeah. It's a deliberate act of defiance.
That's like, now I'm going to do my own thing.
Yeah. Peters calls it moral perversity.
Okay.
So it's a big deal.
It's a big deal. And, this idea of willful rebellion, it hinges on two things.
Okay.
First, that humans have a choice.
We have free will. We have free will.
Right.
We can choose God or reject him.
Right.
And second, that we actually know God's will
Okay.
because he's revealed it to us.
Revelation.
Yeah.
Okay.
And Connor, he lays out these 4 stages of revelation.
Right. Let's hear them.
All right. So first, revelation in nature.
Like Psalm 19.1 talks about the heavens declare the glory of God.
Yeah. Well, you just look around at the world and, there's got to be something bigger than us behind all this.
It's hard to deny that. Yeah.
Right. And, they even share this anecdote about a Russian seminary student
Oh, yeah, I read that.
who starts questioning atheism just by observing the design of a tree.
Like, how did this happen?
Yeah.
Right.
Just the complexity. It's
Right.
amazing. Okay. So second stage,
Okay.
revelation through reason and conscience.
That inner knowing.
Yeah, that sense of right and wrong that we all have.
Right.
Like it's written on our hearts, you know?
Okay.
Some people call it a God-shaped vacuum.
There's something missing, and we know it.
Exactly. Okay, third, revelation through the Mosaic Law.
The Old Testament law.
Yeah, and this is interesting, right? Because the law wasn't meant to be the way to salvation.
It was a guide.
Yeah, like a tutor, you know?
Pointed to Christ.
Exactly. Like Romans 10.4 says Christ is the end of the law.
Okay, and finally.
The ultimate revelation, Jesus Christ himself.
Oh, God with us.
God with us.
Matthew 1:23.
Yeah. Connor makes this really interesting point that, this ultimate revelation, it illuminates the darkness for those who see it.
Right.
But for those who reject it, it actually intensifies the darkness.
It makes it worse.
Yeah, and it leaves them without excuse. Romans 1.20 says that.
Okay.
So we're responsible.
It's on us.
Yeah. God's not to blame, And it's not all Satan's fault either.
Right.
We choose.
We have a part to play.
Yeah.
Okay. And that leads right into truth 3, right?
Yeah.
Those separated by sin are lost. And they use that Greek word, apolumi.
Which means?
To perish.
To perish.
To be utterly destroyed.
Yeah. It's serious stuff.
It's not just a little time out.
No.
Right? This is
eternal separation from God.
And God doesn't want that for anyone.
No, he doesn't. 2 Peter 3.9 tells us that.
Right.
But the consequence of rejecting truth is that lostness.
Right.
2 Thessalonians 2.10.
And Luke 19 point then. For the Son of Man came to seek and to save the lost. It's a pretty clear-cut statement.
Yeah, very clear. And, it's not like you're partially lost or temporarily lost. You're either lost or you're saved.
Okay.
You're either under condemnation or you're experiencing freedom.
You're in darkness or you're walking in the light.
Exactly.
And that state of lostness.
Yeah.
That's not just a theological idea.
No.
It's a real state of hopelessness.
It is. It's like Proverbs 24.20. There is no future for the evil man.
And 1 Thessalonians 4.13 talks about those who have no hope. It makes sense why missionaries feel that urgency.
Yeah, that sense of, we got to do something.
Right. William Carey said, the thought of someone perishing forever should rouse us to action.
Yeah. Powerful words.
It is powerful.
Yeah.
But the good news is this wall of sin, this barrier,
Yeah.
it's not the end of the story.
No, it's not. That's where salvation comes in.
It's the bridge.
Yeah, the bridge that God builds.
Right. And he provides the way.
He does. Like
Right.
Romans 5.2, we have access by faith into this grace in which we stand.
It's access to God.
Yes.
And it's important to note here, salvation doesn't ignore sin.
No.
It doesn't say it's okay.
It confronts it head on.
It deals with it.
Yeah.
Fully.
Salvation satisfies God's wrath against sin, and it establishes a righteousness
Okay.
that allows us to have fellowship with a holy God.
Wow.
Romans 4.8. Blessed is the man whose sin the Lord will never count against him.
It's taken care of.
It's done. And that's the heart of the gospel message.
Right. The death, burial, resurrection of Christ.
Yeah, 1 Corinthians 15.1, the 4 lays it all out.
Okay.
And that word salvation.
Yesha in Hebrew.
Yesha in Hebrew.
Soteria in Greek.
Soteria in Greek.
It's this idea of safety, deliverance, wholeness.
Yeah, it's like being rescued.
Rescued from danger.
Yes.
Okay, and your notes actually break down the 3 tenses of salvation, which I thought was really helpful.
Oh, yeah. It gives us a fuller picture.
Okay, so first.
All right. So first, salvation past. This is that moment of rescue from the penalty of sin.
Okay.
Like the condemnation, eternal separation,
Right.
the dominion of sin in our lives, that fear, it's all gone.
Ephesians 2.8, Titus 3.5.
Key verses. Then we have salvation present.
Okay.
This is the ongoing process.
Okay.
We're being rescued from the power of sin.
So we still struggle,
We do.
but we have help.
But we have help.
Right.
We resist temptation.
We try to live in ways that honor God.
And we're empowered by the Holy Spirit.
Philippians 2.1,
Yeah.
1 Corinthians 15.2.
Yeah. And then finally, salvation future.
Okay. The ultimate redemption.
Yeah, this is when our bodies and even creation itself are completely redeemed.
When Christ returns,
When Christ returns.
we'll be rescued from the very presence of sin.
No more sin.
Revelation 21.27. Wow.
It's going to be amazing.
That's a lot to look forward to.
It is.
So it's not just a one-time event.
No.
It's a process.
It's a journey.
Yeah.
And it's all initiated by God.
He started it.
2 Peter 3.9, 2 Corinthians 5.18.
We didn't do anything to earn it.
Nope.
He just loves us that much.
He does.
Right.
It's amazing. And, this whole plan of salvation,
Yeah.
it came about because of his perfect holiness.
Right.
And his boundless love.
It's like two sides of the same coin.
Exactly.
Okay, let's talk about holiness first. Exodus 15.1 house. Moses says, "Who is like you, majestic in holiness?"
Powerful words.
It's like there's no comparison.
No.
And we see that throughout the scriptures.
Yeah.
God's holiness is on full display.
Isaiah had that vision in Isaiah 6.5.
Woe to me, for I am a man of unclean lips. He realized just how far short he fell
Yeah, we all do.
compared to God's holiness.
God's standard is perfection.
Right.
We can't reach it on our own.
And God's holiness, it's not just one of his attributes.
No.
It's essential to who he is.
Like it defines him.
Thinkers like Gill and Pink, they really emphasize that.
They do.
It's not just something he does, it's who he is.
Yeah.
Right.
And that word holy,
Yeah.
it means set apart.
Consecrated.
Consecrated.
Different. Other.
Other, yeah.
And Baker explains that this really underscores God's transcendence.
He's beyond us.
Completely other.
Yeah.
And Connor connects this back to our understanding of sin.
Right.
Sin is sin because it violates God's holy nature.
It's the opposite.
It's the opposite.
Yeah.
It's the antithesis of holiness.
And it breaks our fellowship with God.
Creates that separation.
That wall.
Drummond talks about God's revulsion against sin. It's like he can't even stand to be near it.
And that's why we need a sin bearer.
Right. Someone to take the punishment.
And that's Jesus.
Hebrews 9.28. He appeared once for all at the end of the ages to do away with sin by the sacrifice of himself.
Yeah. He's the only one who could do it.
Acts 4.12. Salvation is found in no one else.
And Jesus himself said, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. John 14.6.
So that's the holiness side.
Okay.
Right. And then equally important
Yeah.
is God's love.
It's love.
John 3.20.
For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish, but have eternal life.
I mean, that's the most famous verse in the Bible for a reason.
Right.
It's the heart of it all.
Yeah. And Carver and Drummond, they talk about missions as the message and the heart of God's love.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. And Tozer, he talks about love as the pillar of hope for the whole world.
Wow. So it's not just like God is up there being holy and we have to appease him. It's that he loves us and wants to be with us,
Yeah.
but our sin is the problem.
The barrier.
And Christ is the bridge.
The solution.
That's amazing.
And, the fact that Christ came to earth,
The incarnation.
the incarnation,
Yeah.
that's the ultimate expression of God's love.
1 John 4.9.
This is how God showed his love among us. He sent his one and only Son into the world that we might live through him.
And John 3.1.
For God did not send his Son into the world to condemn the world, but to save the world through him.
So there's no conflict between God's holiness and his love.
No, they work together.
They're compatible.
Yeah,
Drummond says that.
he does.
And sometimes people have this like watered down view of God's love.
Right, like he's just indulgent and overlooks sin.
Yeah, and that's not accurate.
Not at all.
Pink talks about that.
Yeah,
God is holy, and he's just
exactly. And when we say God is love,
1 John 4.8.
yeah, we're not just talking about one of his actions.
It's his nature.
It's who he is.
Tozer makes that clear.
Yeah.
So God's love, it's everlasting.
Never changes.
It extends to the unworthy.
Yeah. Us. Jeremiah 31.3. I have loved you with an everlasting love.
And Romans 5.8. But God demonstrates his own love for us in this. While we were still sinners, Christ died for us.
Wow.
It's amazing.
In Pink, he says it's free, spontaneous, uncaused.
It just flows from him.
It does.
And Connor adds that it's also morally conditioned,
Meaning.
meaning that God's love is in line with his character,
Okay.
his integrity,
Yeah, it's not arbitrary.
his justice.
That makes sense.
So now we have this question.
Yeah.
If God is love, what about hell?
Eternal punishment.
Right. Does that contradict his love?
Tough question.
And your sources actually address this.
They do.
Drummond and Gill, they argue that God's standards are absolute,
Right.
and his justice demands a satisfaction
A payment.
for sin.
Yeah.
And since God is eternal,
The punishment has to be eternal, too. It's not about God being mean.
it's about the nature of sin and the nature of God.
Exactly.
And Paul, in his ministry,
Yeah.
he was motivated by God's love.
2 Corinthians 5.11-14.
But that didn't mean he downplayed the reality of judgment.
No, he knew how serious it was.
It made him even more urgent.
Yeah, to share the message of salvation.
Okay, so we've talked about holiness and love as God's motivations for salvation.
Oh, why?
The why.
Yeah.
But how is this salvation delivered?
Good question.
Well, William Carey, on his deathbed,
Yeah.
he had a request.
What was it?
He wanted people to focus on Christ,
Okay.
not on him.
That's powerful.
And it shows the Christ-centered nature of salvation.
Yeah, like Peter's also emphasizes that.
It's not about us.
No.
It's about Jesus.
Exactly. And that word mission,
From the Latin, missio,
to send.
to send.
It highlights that God is a sending God.
He sent.
He's a missionary God.
And the biggest sending event ever.
The incarnation.
But God becoming flesh.
Yeah. That's missions on a cosmic scale.
Right. Thomas Watson, in his catechism, he asks, did God leave man to perish in the estate of sin and misery?
Good question.
And the answer is no.
No.
He entered into a covenant of grace
Amazing.
and sent a Redeemer,
Emmanuel.
God with us.
Matthew 1.23.
Romans 8.3.
Galatians 4.4.
Colossians 1.15.
It's all over the scriptures.
Hebrews 1.3.
1 Timothy 3.16.
1 John 4.2.
God sent his son.
And this was his choice.
Psalm 115.3. Our God is in heaven. He does whatever pleases him.
He decided to do it this way.
And the result is Jesus.
Fully human.
Fully God.
The God-man.
Yeah.
Not just a moral teacher like Kant thought.
Right.
Not just a religious man like Schleiermacher believed.
But the God-man.
Like Charles Wesley said, veiled in flesh, the Godhead see.
Beautiful.
So beautiful. And Jesus himself said, all things have been committed to me by my Father. No one knows the Son except the Father, and no one knows the Father except the Son, and those to whom the Son chooses to reveal him. Matthew 11.27.
He's the only way to know God.
Finney actually defines a mediator as someone who reconciles parties separated by an obstacle.
Okay.
And in our case, that obstacle is sin.
Yeah.
And Jesus is the mediator.
1 Timothy 2.